Susan, when I mention the word mediumship, what instantly comes to mind?
I just feel so much love, that whole connection to the other side, to spirits. It's just beautiful, and it's like music to your ears.
So when you say connection to spirit,
Uh-huh.
how does that play itself out for you or for anybody? Is it always the same? Is it a feeling? How
No,
can you
it's
explain that?
it's not always the same. It's not always the same. Um, it's just the feeling that comes over you that you have this connection and you're open to whatever spirit has to say, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
So when it's interesting when as most of y'all know, I also am a medium. Susan's a medium. Susan's been a medium for longer than I by far. But the good part is that it's born in us. We everybody has the same ability.
Yes.
It's what you do with it. It's how you develop it. How you grow the senses that we have kind of suppressed over time, and instead we express them and pick up with those senses to learn and grow in mediumship. And so, Susan, as when I hear you talk, it's interesting because I too am exhilarated when I have a good mediumship hit.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's nothing in this world that can give you more.
Satisfaction.
There's the word.
Yes.
Absolutely. Satisfaction.
Oh,
And also,
goosebumps.
exactly. And also it can give you more feeling of having the way to impact people's lives in a positive
Yes.
way
Yes.
by giving that final conversation, that final close, and the final closure to someone who is on the other side who needed to come through so this person on this side may be able to find rest or peace or understanding.
Right.
And that's the interesting thing, that the mediumship, that's the biggest key to mediumship, wouldn't you say, is the
Yes.
message.
Because what you're doing is you're giving that sitter, that person that wants to connect so badly to a loved one on the other side, you're giving them that feeling, that healing, that knowing that, life continues on always, with or without the human body. We still have our loved ones around us
Well,
all
isn't
the
that and
time.
isn't that the key to mediumship that I think people may miss is that mediumship is built on the concept that there is life after physical death. So
Right.
love lives on, energy lives on, and therefore that energy, that love, that spirit comes back across because they don't have a physical body doesn't mean they're
Right.
still not involved.
Right.
Isn't that one of the tenets of mediumship?
Exactly. Yes. And they were around us all the time. It could be simple as seeing feathers, seeing money, hearing voices, hearing somebody call your name and there's nobody there. Or hearing a song play and you think, oh my gosh, that reminds me of my aunt. And that was her song.
Hmm.
And that's a song that's never played on the radio, and all of a sudden it's played. So, there's
Exactly.
specific, nothing happens by accident. There
Exactly.
are no accidents, no coincidences. You may be driving along and all of a sudden you see a truck pass with an uncle's name, Uncle like Jeffrey's Florist or something, and this is just to remind you that they're there.
Hmm.
Well, you dream about them. They visit you often in our
Hmm.
dreams. They sometimes they don't have a particular message. They just come in and say, "Hey, I'm here,
Hmm.
thinking about you, wish you well," and that was it.
Hmm.
Sometimes they do come with a message.
Now, one of the things that you and I have talked about, and folks remember we wrote the book on mediumship. So if you
Yes, we
want
did.
the definitive book, it's called The Mediums, a guidebook, available on Amazon. Susan Grayson, Don Rumer-Rivera.
Uh-huh.
But the thing that one of the things that if I've heard more than anything else from somebody who doesn't quite understand mediumship,
Uh-huh.
is the conversation around how do I know it's them?
It's gorgeous, and it's a beautiful book.
Yeah, and actually an easy read.
Uh-huh.
You don't need to. This is the other thing about the book. When we wrote the book, it was more of an instruction, kind of like to help people who want to take time to develop this. And so it's a guidebook, and therefore it's not an instruction manual, as in you must do this, you must do this. It's not
Right.
as a 8 week program. Oh, in 8 weeks you two can be a medium if you do this, this, and this. This is a book that helps you to understand what mediumship is, what it isn't, because in the book it even says this book does not is not going to it's not going to tell you not only what it is, but it's going to warn you about what isn't mediumship. It also identifies psychic skills and psychic energies and how they are different than mediumship energy, because mediumship energy is extremely different, and mediumship has a different purpose. Psychic energy and psychic messages are usually present issues and future intentions or future ideas or even what's coming ahead of you, where mediumship is a message. It's truly a message from the other side. They're not going to be telling you something that's coming along. They're more about giving you a message that you needed to hear in this moment. So, Susan, when you when we sat down to write the book, the one thing that I hear often, more often than any other thing, for people who are a bit skeptical, is like, how do I know it's them?
Because, yeah,
How would you help somebody to understand
you would
that?
know it was them because we're going to give you specific evidence that that is the spirit that you know is your uncle or your aunt or your dad or your mom or whatever.
So, what in that sense, if I was to look and think, what would set the reading of, oh, your grandmother's here, she's on the other side, you have a grandmother on the other side, she passed, and she cooked in the house, and so does that fit? Is we're talking that, or we're talking about
That's
something
that's
more?
too general. That could be anybody, anybody's grandmother. But there's gonna be something specific about that grandmother. Maybe that grandmother loved to shop and she really loved to collect all these little knickknacks that she would put around the house. Or she had these her favorite flower was a lilac and she'd always pick the lilacs and put it on the dining room table. There's something specific about that grandmother. Or she always wore this beautiful violet perfume and you could smell it. There's something, it has to be, you have to identify that person so that the sitter knows exactly who you're talking about.
And has confidence, because you
Yes.
would not know this, right?
Right,
I mean, it's
right,
not something like you're sitting around saying, "Oh, every person has lilacs. Everybody loves lilacs." No, not so
right.
much. And
Exactly.
so I see what you're saying. So you're saying that, and this is the one key thing, folks, to understand when you are sitting with a medium. You're gonna, if you to get a quality mediumship read, you want to make sure that they're giving you evidential information. And that, again, when I say evidential information, what I am saying is information that is very specific to
Mm-hmm.
the individual who've crossed over, information that we would not or could not have known, and therefore
Right.
when it rings through, as it does with most ratings in that sense, then you realize, oh, it could be no one other than, and it was meant for me,
Right.
because again, that is very specific. Now, if you were to give me an example in a reading that you've had recently, maybe where you actually pulled and like a piece of evidence.
One that I did quite a while ago at Tina's place, of course, with all the mediums. I told this young man, I said, I see your grandfather, and he lived in a beautiful log home, log cabin up in the woods, and he has a glass eye, and he's missing a leg, and this is from the war. And he says, yeah, that's my grandfather. I mean, that's very specific. How many
Exactly.
people have a glass eye and a missing leg
From the war
from
and
the
living in a
war?
cabin.
Right,
Four pieces of information that
right.
does not fit into our parameter of life.
So that's what you need to do. You need to be specific so that that person understands, oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. That is my grandmother, or, you know, they understand the message. And always, the spirit that comes through will leave a message for you, for that sitter. Yeah.
Now, if you, you and I have talked so many times, and we sat down and wrote this book, and it's interesting. The one question I didn't ask you, and it just came to my mind, of all your readings, and you know my readings, and so and I talk a lot, as you can tell. But what was the one reading that really probably touched you, if good or bad, either way, but it left an impression so much that it seems to be your most powerful read? I'm not saying it's your best read
Yeah.
necessarily, but your most powerful. Which one would that be?
Probably my friend Wayne that we used to trade readings when I used to go to the El Paso Fair, which I did 5 times a year. And that last time every single time we went, 5 times a year, we would trade readings. And that one last time I saw her, I was doing a reading for her, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm just making this up because I'm getting nothing. And then all of a sudden, the spirit tells me, this will be the last time you see Wayne. And it was the last time. And during the reading, I felt like, what am I going to say to her? I'm certainly not going to tell her, she may die or something. But I did tell her, I got the distinct impression that she needed to be very careful and put the angels around her when she was in a vehicle, driving or riding.
So was it one
And
of her loved ones who were kind of giving you this information, or how did this?
I
Was it
don't
your
know if it
spirits?
was this, it was just this, I just
Mm-hmm.
heard the words.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, 2 months later, she had been in that bad. She was riding in a motorhome in the back. She was sleeping, and the car hit some water or ice or something in Houston, and it went off the road, and she died immediately.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and that was 2 months later.
Yeah.
So I never did see her again.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you think of your readings throughout life, and Susan and I both have had so many readings with so many people. Even last night we had some readings because we have a group that gets together, and so you sit and you read for so many people that it doesn't become it doesn't become you're always a little surprised because again every energy is different, every way in which we
Yes.
receive it is different, every way in which they want to communicate with us can be different. There are some similarities that run throughout for sure, but there are often times where something is very different, and then you have to figure out, oh, how do I accommodate this feeling, how do I accommodate this energy, how can I explain this,
Well,
because the thing, so it's interesting how even with all that happening, there are still some readings, like you said, that are so strong because of what happens after that you can't help but remember them.
Well, on Sunday we did a reading for everybody. There was like three of us, and we did a healing on everybody, and we also gave them a little information, which my readings were mediumship. But just like I saw this young woman. This young woman sat down, and I said, there's this little boy playing right at your feet. He's playing with a little truck and everything. And I said, did you lose a son? And she said, yes, I did. And I could see him plain as day. There's just different ways that we work. You know, every medium, there's really no right or wrong. As long as you're getting the message across, you're able to deliver something to the sitter to ease their pain. And but I just see things. I see things around that person that I'm reading for. But I mean, clear as day, I could see this little boy playing at her feet. And she said yes. And, it's kind of like scary. I don't know, did I say this? Did she have a miscarriage or what? But you just have to say whatever it's going to take to heal that person.
Yeah. But one of the tenets, in that same vein, one of the tenets that we learn and we respect and we appreciate to be a good medium is you have to evaluate the message for its
Mm-hmm.
ability to make sure it connects, but you also have to use some logic and reason
Yeah.
to not shock, because shock is not the
Yeah,
intent.
you don't
You
want to
don't want
say,
to,
oh, your cousin hung themselves on the tree in the backyard.
yeah, with a
That's
thick
very
leather belt and
painful.
just hanging there, whatever. Yeah,
No, you
yeah,
would say something like, your cousin is saying that he's takes responsibility for his, ending his life.
yeah,
Say something like that.
yeah. I remember last night during a reading, I came to a conflict, internal conflict, and I was stumbling. As many times as I've done this, I can't believe this, but I was stumbling because the young lady whom I was connected to that was coming through, I realized her life ended early. And I'm like, oh, and I'm thinking, how do I say this? And I'm like, and I'm thinking, I've done this so many times, but on this one specific one, it felt so much more personal, you know? And I'm like, oh gosh, and I really struggled on how to find the right words. And then finally I did, if you remember. And we were doing a gallery, and for those of you who were talking about, to know what we're talking about, we were doing a gallery mediumship, which is there's a bunch of folks and there's a few mediums, and the mediums are reading for the group and trying to find an energy who is there for someone. And so again, this energy, I didn't know who it was for, but I knew a lot of information. And finally, the person said, "Oh, I think that's for me. I know that's for me," because then I started getting the, "Oh, that's for me." And so, but it was interesting. You know, again, you don't want to shock them. You don't. The information is there to help give confidence, but you can find a way
but
to
if you
say it.
didn't disclose that information, they wouldn't know who it was.
Exactly, but you find a way to disclose it in a way that it doesn't cause pain, but it can cause recollection and confirmation. Because recollection and confirmation is the key so much to be able to give the message that follows. And so when they give us a piece of data like that, you have to figure out, okay, how can I say this to make sure that it's coming across in a way that won't trigger? Because that's the thing is, there's certain things that happen in people's lives that trigger, and you have to be careful to avoid the trigger, but give the information. And that's one thing we have to be very cognizant of. And there's a whole ethical, I guess, realm built up around mediumship for that purpose. Because when you are talking, there are only three people, and can you explain this to folks, people understand it? There are only three folks in a mediumship at any time, right? Isn't that the way they do it?
That is the person receiving the messages, the sitter, we call it a sitter, and it's the medium, and then it's the spirit on the other side. And the spirit often comes through guides or, angels, whatever. But it is very important. It's important that, oftentimes a spirit will come through apologizing for their behavior, apologizing for what they've done to the sitter. And that's difficult too. But the sitter needs to hear that to
Yes.
heal.
For that closure that we talked
that
about.
closure, exactly.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, because I know that, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. We have some people who will sit down in front of us who will come in because they want a reading with a specific energy or a specific spirit, whichever you want to see it.
Right.
And we, as a medium, I'm not at a point where I want them to tell me who's coming in necessarily, who they want in, because that sets up a standard of deliver this person, which can create a conflict. But what I do say is, let's see who comes in. And more often than not, if the person who is coming in to be read has done their pre-work, and the pre-work is again sitting there saying, hey, I'm going to have a mediumship read on this time at this day, on this calendar date, and send it out to the universe saying, hey, I'm hoping that this person comes in. Can you come in? Asking for that loved one to come in. It is not a surprise when the loved one comes in because the loved one's had time to do it. But if you don't do the pre-work and then you're frustrated as a person having sitting down for a reading, you're frustrated. And if I asked you in advance, hey, did you have a time to sit and probably send it out to the universe? Oh no, I didn't have time for it. Then you really can't be frustrated that the fact that the person you were hoping to come in can come in, because this isn't Hollywood. This isn't Hollywood. Hollywood has a very stylized way in which mediumship works, but the reality is you couldn't control the person when they were alive. You are not going to control them when they're on the
Think
side.
of it this way. All of us in our lifetime, we have so many people we've met, friends, family, relatives, whatever, and you don't know who really, you make an impact on everybody you meet, even if it's just for a brief second. But you affect other people, and sometimes somebody wants to come through, and it's probably the last person that they ever expected to hear from, but that person has a special message just for you, and that's why yes, the sitter may say, I want to get a hold of my dad, but well, maybe the dad is busy or something on the other side, and there's somebody that really has an important message to tell you because of the impact you had on their lives. So you really have to allow who's ever wanting to come through, because they'll barge their way to the front of the line here, and they want to be first, and they want to get their message across, and that's what's important.
Absolutely. I can tell you that sometimes they come in when you're not looking. I'm sure you've experienced that, where you weren't even looking for a reading and a reading found you.
Right, right. Yeah. And you know, if you pay attention, there's always messages around you. There's always you feel prompted to do something or not to do something because you know, part of it is your consciousness, part of it is, you know, your loved ones on the other side. They want to see you um, make it through a time, and you know, there's just so much going on, but there's no coincidences, and you know, there's so much to learn in one lifetime. There's so much to experience,
Yeah.
and it's so beautiful to be able to help people.
Exactly. It's interesting because I don't know if anybody out there has watched my channels, and there is a short on YouTube, on Facebook, and the rest, and the short was created for an incident that happened at the Denver airport, and Susan's heard this before, and
Oh, it's
actually
mind blowing.
this is an experience that we put as the first chapter of the book to kind of give you an idea of how strong a mediumship reading can be and unexpected. And so, just a short synopsis is that I'm sitting there in the airport, had a long layover. I sat down, I look over, there's this woman and an older woman and a younger woman sitting there. The older woman is, has a smallerish woman with the hair pulled back in a bun and, and gray, the salt and pepper running through and so forth. And then beside her was this woman in more of a business attire and she's on her phone and they're just not communicating and you can see it, but that's not unusual in an airport. If you've been to an airport, you know what I'm talking about.
Or
And so,
anywhere.
exactly. And so, they're just kind of there waiting. And so I looked up and then looked down and I'm somebody who, when a spirit comes in, if it's an older female, I'm getting cold. I get instant cold, and I call it my personal climates because I get instant cold for that, or I get heat for others. And so I got cold, and I looked up. I'm thinking, who is here? And I look around, and I'm figuring out. And then the woman looks at me. The older woman looks at me, and she kind of gives me that look. I'm like, oh. So now, as solid as Susan is with me, this woman was solid like Susan. So I mean, it was a spirit, but she was there to show me herself to ensure that I communicated. And I'm like, okay, no, I'm off the clock. No, 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 I ain't doing this. And so, we're talking. When I say talking, by the way, we're talking with the minds.
Telepathically.
And so we're communicating. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. And she's like, will you talk to my daughter for me? I'm like, no, no, and no, I don't do this. And so she was very strong and insistent. And I was at a point where I'm like, okay, whatever. So I kind of gave an indication, if she acknowledges me, I'll speak. And then sure enough, within a few seconds, I said 20, 30 seconds, she looked up and the daughter, this is, looks up and acknowledges me. I'm like, oh man, now I got to really communicate. And so I said, hey, if you don't mind, I'd like to, I'm a medium or whatever. And if you're interested, I have a reading for you. And she said, oh yeah. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, hurdle number one, because I don't do this. I really don't like doing this, and it's not my intention. But anyway, but the woman was so insistent. So I did, and I read for her, told her, the woman beside her, explained completely and whatever's going on. And she's like, oh yeah, that's my mother. And I'm like, well, but she wanted me to let you know that she loves you and she's okay. She's okay. And she's like, I appreciate that, but she's not on the other side. Well, what? You know? And so I was very distraught by that, thinking, what in the world? Anyway, so when the connection lost, and she was, I appreciate, she said, no, I'm glad you did that, because, she said, it definitely wasn't my mother, but yeah, she's over here. I'm like, it's fine. So I had to go to the restroom. I came back, sat down, and she was, as I'm coming back, she's in tears. And I'm like, oh man, see, this is why I don't do it. I don't get people crying. I made her even think of nothing. And then she looked at me and she said, I wanted to thank you. You gave me the best gift of my life. I just found that my mother died. And so her mother had just passed, and her mother wanted her to know at that moment that she passed okay. So she's okay on the other side, in other words. And the woman was like, that's the best gift. And I had so much energy, I didn't know what to do with it. So I went out to the patio, because in Terminal A of the Denver airport, there's a patio. I went out there and I just didn't know what to do, so I recorded it. So me, after that event, immediately after that event, if you go to the shorts on Sonoran Mystic Tarot under the YouTube channel, you will find that short and that experience, and me flustered by the whole experience, because it was exhilarating and confusing and everything else at the same time. But when we talk about experiences and about, that would be one of my strongest, because again, I wasn't looking to do a mediumship
Right.
rip. I don't do those generally that way. I turn it off usually. And we'll talk about turning on and off in a minute. But all these things were significant. And ultimately, what happens? We wind up getting a mediumship read, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. So crazy to say
It
the
is,
least.
it is.
But
And you didn't expect it. You're there
no,
at the airport. You don't think, something like that's going to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah. The last thing I wanted to do was a mediumship read, but it's and that is that's a good follow through too. Is when I was talking about the turning it on and off. Can you explain and help people understand about turning it on and off?
Well, when you're doing mediumship, you're going to turn it on, and it's like your spirit. You're telling your spirits, okay, I'm ready to, you know, to deliver, to receive and deliver. And but then there's times when you're done, you say thank you, and you kind of just imagine like the top of your head turning it off, and because your guides and your angels and everybody, they have to respect your space. You have your life, but there's times where you want to be open and help others, and that's different. So you have to be able to turn it on or off.
Yeah,
You just
absolutely.
say thank you, um, and we'll talk later.
Thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah, right.
Just like not today, not today.
Right.
And who does the communication? Who does that communication? Generally speaking, do you think?
Well, we have angels, we have guides, we have a whole host of guides. We have tons of helpers on the other side that want to connect us. And so you have to raise your vibration. And because they're on the other side, they have to lower theirs so you blend together. And when spirit sends us messages, they usually try to send us messages that we would be familiar with, like our toolbox. Like, if you work at a hospital, you're familiar with certain tools that the handyman isn't. But the spirits will give you messages that you can connect with, that you can understand, and you can relate to in the best way to tell the sitter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're they're playing this song, and I don't know if you're familiar with this particular song, but they're saying this is from your mother.
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like that. They will do their best to communicate ways so you can communicate to the sitter.
Mm-hmm.
In the language that you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So back in reference to the book, then when we talk about the book, it's interesting how when we were writing the book, we wanted to make sure that we didn't take anything for granted. We wanted to make sure that anything that you would need to know or have to use to build upon the next steps, that was delivered, but it's delivered in a very intentional way. And so if I were to want to explore mediumship, or if I was somebody who was already a medium but wanted to learn more to perfect it, then in my opinion, our book is perfect for those, and it's perfect for every level. Even if you're an experienced medium, we've given you some things that a number of mediums would not know. We've also given the way in which we've trained, we've given provided information and direction on expanding people with doing gallery readings and platform mediumship. Because folks, there's one-on-one readings. So if you sit down in front of me or Susan or any other medium, it's just you and me, and so we're having a conversation. The spirit comes in, so there's only three of us, the triangle, in that conversation. But there are times where you'll see mediums are in demand so much often that they do platform mediumship, or and there's gallery mediumship too, which is similar but in different veins. The point is, you have a number of people being read by one or so mediums, and therefore no one's guaranteed in that group reading. But when spirit comes in, some spirit's going to come in for some people in that reading. And so we help people to understand that, because as you and I know, and we've been lucky enough to take the classes to help understand it too, then therefore train others.
Right.
We teach people in the book. We help them to understand what platform mediumship is and how it works, and then how you can perform it. And maybe you could help enlighten folks on what is platform mediumship.
Okay, so we have different types of mediumship, just like all mediums do their own thing in their own way. You may have someone like Teresa Caputo that, sometimes she sketches things just like Alison Dubois, or Tyler Henry. Tyler Henry does a lot of psychometry too, where he holds objects when he's reading about somebody. But so there's different methods. You have to we what we do is we talk about the different ways to develop your mediumship, so that you don't have to feel like you have to do it like John Edward, or you find your own way to get your messages across. And um, and of course everyone has different gifts. We have the clairs, which is French for clear, Clear, and it's spelled Clair. But there's different clairs, like you may get messages through your hearing, or you all of a sudden you taste something, or you smell something, or you just know. You just, like clairvoyant, which I guess I would say I am. I see pictures. When I see a person, I see pictures around them of somebody, or, you may see a person. I see a person with a uniform on, but it's not an American uniform. So I think that he fought in another country. And so you get specific things about that person, not just he has gray hair and a mustache or anything. You get more specific, like he worked on the railroad, or he did this. He loved to eat spaghetti, whatever.
Hmm.
But you're getting specifics so that the sitter understands exactly who you're talking
Hmm.
about. And so, in our book and our upcoming class, we're going to be teaching ways that people can develop their own unique style of doing mediumship.
Exactly. And it's the interesting thing is that we all have the gift. We all it's not a gift, it's an ability. It's you can say it's a gift, but it's also an ability. Because again, we all have it, so we just have to develop it and develop the senses again that we're born with already. We just push them back because we felt we don't need that because other things come like our sight and whatever. And so, as humans, our sight, our hearing, and those things become so much more pronounced, and that we push back, or because of some
Or
spiritual
you're
reasons,
programmed.
or
You start
exactly.
school and you're programmed to act a certain way, and to disregard, if you see a spirit in your bedroom at night, disregard it. Don't that's Hollywood.
Right.
But it's not. These
Yeah.
are these are gifts that we all have in certain degrees,
Exactly.
and we just have to realize we either work with it or we don't. But we're usually frowned upon to not work with it. You
Yeah.
don't that's just a fantasy. The little child that you're playing with when you're 3 years old. No, it's just your imagination.
Hmm.
Where really there's so much more to it than that.
There is, and the one thing have there's so many facets that always amaze me, and I'm always fascinated by it. So I'm never without some surprise with any reading or with any experience, because every time I think I've gotten my clairs down, I'm thinking, oh, my strongest clair is this, which means my strongest connection, my strongest piece of way of communicating. And so, and all of a sudden something else will happen. I'll think, oh, I can't really see spirits, and all of a sudden a spirit's there in front of me as live as can be. I'm like, okay, I better be careful with that one because guess what? I can. And then another time, a spirit will come in, an energy will come in, whatever you want to say. That spirit comes in with their energy and they pronounce themselves in hearing. And I'm like, oh, they're telling me this. And sometimes I use the word telling, but when during my mediumship reads, if I use the word telling, but it's not from me actually hearing it, I will tell them, I'm saying, when I'm saying telling in this reading, let me explain to you that it's like I'm getting this information and I know it's not mine because I wouldn't say it that way, I don't think that way, and it's nothing I'm connected to. So when I'm saying that, I clarify to them that that's what when I say that. But there are times where when I say they're telling me, oh no, they're actually telling me. I can hear their
Right,
voice,
right.
and it's funny because quite often I've noticed that sometimes when I'm actually hearing them, part of the reason why they're giving me that moment to hear them, which maybe is not something I have otherwise, is that it's an accent that's important. So they want me to get the gist of the accent or the tone, how they speak, because they very well be maybe somebody who speaks at a very specific pace or very monotone. And so if I were to say that as the aspect, if they're telling me this and they're telling me this like this, and they're like, oh yeah, because that's what it is. I used the phrase not so long ago during a reading, and I just put it out there, and I said they're telling me this, and they're like, Oh gosh, that is my father because he told me that same phrase
Mm-hmm.
all the time. And she said, as soon as you said it the way you said it, I
Just like her
knew that was my
dad.
dad. Yeah. And so a medium has to understand, and we do, if we're good at what we do, we understand when the implication is part of the conversation is exactly what I'm saying and not to be translated, but say it as it is. And other times they do want you to translate. They're okay with you translating because it's not a specific point. And that's again that comes with experience and with time.
And you know, a good way to develop your mediumship is work with energy. Everything is energy. The chair we're sitting on,
Hmm.
the air around us, everything has energy.
Hmm.
So when you touch a particular object of a person that's passed, you're going to be able to understand because we all imprint on an object.
I love that word, by the way.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, and like there's strange places in this country you can drive and you feel the heebie-jeebies
Hmm.
because maybe many people were murdered right there,
Hmm.
and they left their imprint, and it's all
Hmm.
fascinating. It really
And
is.
we're blessed. We live in the Southwest here, and so by living in Arizona, we are blessed by having a community, a town, but it's actually a community that makes the town, in my opinion, called Sedona. And Sedona is known for the energy that is natural to Sedona, but also when you have that many people who are very metaphysically connected, they become an antenna and a rod of energy that draws even more to Sedona. So Sedona isn't just
And
merely
then
a
you have
location,
vortexes too.
and then you
Yeah,
have
all
the
that
vortexes.
energy is very
Hmm.
wild.
Yeah, so we're very blessed that we have those energy sources where we have places where we can go and do that. But it's interesting also is that you don't need to be in a large city to be a medium. You don't need to have a large community around you. These things are helpful, but they're not necessary. What you need to do is open your mind, your heart, your soul, understand what a mediumship is, under what mediumship is, what a medium does, and then learn how to start practicing that. The one thing that mediums do need is practice, because it's
Lots
like
of
vocabulary.
practice.
When you watch a child and you watch a child learn his vocabulary, he mumbles and he's using words or tones, and you're thinking, what is he saying? He knows he's saying something. He's trying to communicate, but it's not registering with you. And eventually he finds the words. He's able to connect a deed to a word. And that's what mediumship does. We start with the mumbles. We start with what is that energy? What is it? What I'm picking up? I don't know. And it's like, why am I getting this brush against my cheek? Why am I feeling my hair move? Why am I hearing this tone? Why am I seeing this shadow? And over time, because we pay more attention, it's like mediums live in this nuanced space between very strong energy and nothingness. There's this nuanced space where there's a small tremor of energy, and that's where we live. We pick up that little bit of energy that isn't on the radar screen, shall we say? And so as we do, we're like, oh, okay. Since I'm now more observant and I'm more sensitive to that energy, to that feeling, then now I completely can connect and understand what it means. And so again, we all have that. We all have that same nuanced space. We just don't entertain ourselves in that space until we practice it. So the one thing I would suggest to you, anybody out there, if you want to do mediumship, try to find a mediumship group. You can find them online. We have a mediumship group that happens on Mondays and Tuesday nights, and it's free on YouTube. Go to look at Sonoran Mystic Tarot or Susan Grayson on YouTube channels, and you will find us there. And reach out to us. But everybody is invited to come and practice your mediumship and your psychic skills. If you want psychic skills, psychic on Tuesday, Monday. Monday is medium. Anyway, but the thing is, you have to practice because, again, like a child learns a vocabulary, since we have suppressed our senses, we have to find ourselves back to that sensitivity, to that nuanced
And you
space.
have to have that desire to want to
Mm-hmm.
learn, to want to get better, to be able to trust your
Mm-hmm.
intuition. We all have intuition. There's a lot of times you drive along and suddenly you get in this nudge, hey, you need to take a right here. and you take a right and you maybe avoided a big accident. This, we all have this intuition.
Yeah.
Don't do this today. Do that instead. Or it's there. You just have to learn to pay attention to it.
Oh, absolutely. And then when you practice enough, the one thing you learn is keeping your ego out of it. Believe me, you will be wrong. It's a common practice initially as you're growing to be wrong about what you think you're receiving. Now, the information you're receiving may be accurate, but because of you trying to figure out what they're saying or how you're trying to figure out how it translates or how you can connect it, you realize, okay, I'm wrong about that, but the information itself usually is right. And then as you play around with it, and you over time you learn how, oh no, that makes sense because now this is it. And so down the road, when you have that same sense again and again and again and again, you then realize, oh, okay, I've had this before. If I'm seeing this paint horse or whatever, then it means this. Or if I'm seeing this gray dog, it means this.
Or numbers.
Or numbers or whatever is connecting to your lived experience, because they're often spirits will use your lived experience to help you understand what they're trying to tell to you. And I'll give you another. It's interesting too because sometimes the spirits will give you gifts or understanding that you don't have initially. And it's interesting, a good friend of ours, Libby, she passed away. And the evening that we heard that she was in the hospital, and she was a younger woman, and she was full of life and vivacious. And then we heard she went to the hospital and rushed to the hospital, like, oh my gosh. So it's interesting, my friend Angie and myself both, and we did not speak of this, but both of us instantly that evening took an astral trip, and so took an astral trip to that. And I used mediumship in that sense because my dad, I called out to him and I said, Dad, I need you to help me with this. And so your spirit guides will do this and help you. And this is kind of mediumship, but it's not. But it is mediumship because again, you're reaching out to spirits on the other side. That's the key. That is the mediumship part. And so it can become far more than just a mediumship read. Down the road, because you're learning to connect to the spirits on the other side, you can then use those spirits on their side to help you in so many other ways of your life, which again, mediumship opens up all of these possibilities, which is really cool because we think, oh, just a mediumship is a reading. No, it gives you access to more information, to more experience, to shared experiences, to knowledge, to information. And so the wonderful thing is when we went there, I wound up, my dad took me to a different place because Libby wasn't in the hospital. And as I'm at the place where she was, it was a farm. As I start to walk closer to her, my dad, I was on like this little wooden kind of bridge across a little creek, and I knew exactly where I was. It's from my childhood. It was interesting. And she was young again, and I started to step off, and my dad put his hand on my shoulder and said, "This is not your path." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm thinking, "What? What do you mean?" And they know. He said, "This is not your." He repeated it. "This is not your path." And I'm like, "Oh, she's not coming back." And sure enough, in the next morning, I heard she had passed. And when I called my friend Angie, she told me that she had taken a similar trip that night and she had learned that Libby wouldn't be coming back either. And so it's interesting. Mediumship is not, again, you can limit it to just readings, but you can also use it in other aspects of your life, because once you can communicate to spirits on the other side, once you can communicate to your spirit guides, once you can communicate to the energies that exist around you, then it opens you up to so many more possibilities. So even if you think maybe I don't want to necessarily be a medium, you don't have to be a medium, but you should pick up this book, learn some of the information on connecting with spirits, because when you are feeling at your least loved or least appreciated or least respected,
You're not alone.
you're not alone. Your energy spirits on the other side, your people who've crossed over, your family, your friends who've crossed over, even the spirits and the energies you didn't know were around you are there. And so you'll meet them and you'll understand how they are always helping you. They're, as you said, nudging you along, giving you information, helping you to make choices. And when you're more, because right now we subconsciously connect with them. We don't know we do it, but they're communicating and moving with us often. But when you now start consciously connecting, man, it's like you have your best friend with you at all times, 24/7.
And there's different ways you can learn to connect to the other side. You can meditate. or go walking in nature, or just find a quiet solitude place. Maybe you have a sacred place in your house that you have statues and photos of your loved ones, and there's all kinds of ways to connect, but you have to learn how to do it within. You have to find your answers within you, and then you can connect
Yeah.
to the other side.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap all of this up, if you could put all this in one kind of thing and saying, I'm most happy that I'm a medium and was being able to develop that ship because of, what would be the one thing that makes you the happiest, thankful that you were
Because
a
it
medium?
brings you joy that your loved ones are okay.
Hmm.
They're on the other side. They're doing things that have meaning to them, and they're not having to deal with the physical problems and the emotions, because they can see things really clearly on the other side.
And you came to mediumship willingly, right? I
Oh
mean, you weren't
yeah,
dragged to it, right?
yeah.
Because I mean, as you know, and to explain that to folks, I was not a willing participant. I did not want to be a medium, and I was happy being a psychic. I
He
liked
was
being a psychic.
encouraged by everybody.
Yes, and they're always saying you're going. I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I don't want to do it. No, no. And so I could have just had a big shirt with no, and I could have
But
just
see,
because
it's his gift, and his gifts to share with other people and to help other people
yeah.
develop their skills and their gifts.
Yeah, so you may not, first, you may not even, when you hear this conversation, you're like, oh, these people have lost their minds. And that is fair enough for some people. If that's what you
Yeah.
believe, then you believe you. And we're okay with that because we're not trying to change minds here. We're just trying to think if you had ever thought about, wanted to know more about, then we're giving you information. But it's interesting because again, I kept saying I'm not a medium, and I kept hearing yes you are, yes you are, yes you are, and then I said okay, let me kind of embrace it a little bit, and I was at a fair, and I was sent a couple, and I was curious why the person had sent them to me because that person is a good reader and they're a very good psychic reader. But they said this is the guy you need to see, and I said well thank you, appreciate that, and they sat down and I told them what I do, and as I started to shuffle cards and do a reading for them, a psychic read, and I think you remember this conversation. There was a young 12 or 13-year-old boy that popped up beside the mother, and so there was a couple that sat in front of me, but within seconds, there were three people in front of me, and he was as solid as they were, kind of like the older woman at the airport. And within a short period of time, I'm asking her about losing a child, and she said they did, 3 months, and et cetera, and they did, and it was shocking. And over time, as I walked through that experience with them, they finally got the evidential. I delivered the evidence, and this is before I really understood mediumship well enough, but I delivered the evidential information that they knew they needed to hear to confirm he was there, because they were raw still. They were very raw, 3 months after. And so there was a trust question, and I totally understand it because I would be curious too. I would be worried too. But anyway, and then I delivered the message, and when I did, and he told me very clearly what I needed to tell them, and I did, and they were in tears, and they're like, "That's exactly what we came here for. We were hoping somebody would connect to his energy, that he would guide us here, and that he would help us to understand." And the questions that he answered for them were the questions they needed, and they said that's exactly what we needed to hear. And so with that experience, I was all in. I was all in. You couldn't stop me after that. I'm like, hell yeah, because I was an engineer at one point in my life, and I was a lawyer at one point in my life, and I also was a real estate investor. And with each of those careers, I helped people to solve problems, to navigate issues, and to find a way through a conflict and into a resolution, and a happier answer on the other side, hopefully. And litigation, that doesn't always work, but and in those career fields, they do not. It is not. It is not conducive to this kind of thinking. But that's what I was. But I didn't really work hard with the other stuff at that point. It was mostly friends and family. But once I really opened up and I realized, because of that experience, that I was doing the same thing. I was helping these people usher themselves through a rough spot to get an answer or closure. Therefore, they can then continue with their life knowing that their answer they needed was given to them. And so that's when I knew, oh yeah, I'm all in at this point. And therefore I was no longer an accidental tourist. I was actually now on board and an actual medium and wanting to do it. And so even if you are calcitrant, even if you're somebody who doesn't think this way, take what we say and just let it marinate. And you may down the
And
road
everybody
register with it.
has experiences.
Yes.
Everybody has experiences. They look back and they say, I don't quite understand that, or I wonder why that happened, you
Yeah.
know? So why not investigate it? Why not take the time to have a better understanding of what happened and how you felt?
Yeah. And again, one other thing is once you have that connection and that communication and open communication with the team on the other side, they are there to help you through so many other things and not just the mediumship read. When you're stumbling over something, they can help give you direction. When you're needing answers, they can help you with that. When you're looking for emotional uptick, they can do that for you too. They can deliver things to you to help you in ways that other people can't because they know you best. Because they were your loved ones, they were your friends, they were your family, they were the people who knew you best and therefore still know you best. And they have your best interest at heart. And I think that's the strongest thing, isn't
Yes,
that?
they do.
I mean, really, it is. When you have that
It's all
relationship.
about love.
Yes, exactly. And it all comes
Love
from
for
a
each
place of
other.
love. Yeah. And when we do mediumship reads, I would say that is one of the biggest and most important things to walk away with is a medium is always giving information from a place of love and light. And
Yes.
again, not to shock, not to cause, somebody
Right,
to,
right,
have a heart attack or something because
right.
of the information. It's more about giving evidential information to ensure that the medium is connected to in from the eyes of the reader, that the medium truly is connected to that spirit, and therefore that when the sitter gets that information that the reader gives them, they can feel it's real and true because they've said, hey, these are the ways in which this is the thing that tell you that that person is here.
And it's very important that a good medium has ethics, you know, that they're sensitive to the people's feelings. And,
Absolutely.
you know.
So Susan, how can people find you if they want to reach out for a mediumship read or even a psychic read?
Right, well, I'm on Facebook, YouTube, Susan Grayson, Psychic Medium, and the first Saturday of every month I give free readings on YouTube and Facebook in the morning. Um, I have this book, and I have Love Your Spiritual Gifts that are also available on Amazon, and so check it out. You know, check out your feelings and find your gifts, find your talents, find your passion, and live a life worth living. Thank you.
Exactly. And I'm Don Rumer-Rivera, Rumer hyphen Rivera. There's no O there. It's Murer, and then hyphen Rivera. And I have The Ultimate Power Within, Unleashing the Magic of Affirmations. It's a book that's available on Amazon, along with Susan's books. Our mediumship book is available on Amazon, and we have a Spanish version. If you speak Spanish, we can help you there too, because we have a Spanish version of the same book.
Don't forget Libby's book that you just wrote.
Yes, and then I actually just released a book called A Silence Too Loud, and that's a book about Libby, whom we talked about earlier. I wrote a book for her in her honor, and it's a fiction book. And in the fiction book, it takes place in Jerome, Arizona, something I know about, and also in Cottonwood and Sedona. So it covers 3 different little metaphysical towns there here in Arizona, and it's me as a psychic medium going in to stay at a hotel, and then there's this spirit there who was killed, and I have to find her, bring her murderer to justice, and reunite her with something that she needs before she can bring closure to herself and then cross over. And so it's quite a fun little distraction, to say the least. And so also available on Amazon. If you look up my name on Amazon, you'll see the different books that I've written, as well as a little ABC book for my grandson, which is called Prince Liam's Alphabet Zoo.
So cute.
So, which is definitely fiction.
But thank you for being with us and sharing this time.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for popping in and
Thank you,
sharing time with
Dylan.
me too. As you can see, Susan and I have spent a lot of time writing this book together, but more importantly, we spent a lot of time learning and growing with mediumship. We even spent the whole week at the International Spiritualist Federation's
Baltimore.
annual event in Baltimore, and we wound up in the same classes. And so we were blessed to spend a lot of time there together too, and it made us want to write something more.
Great mediums.
Oh, absolutely.
Great teachers.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too because the one thing that we did learn that was clearer than anything else is that yeah, you can watch your mediums on TV and the famous ones with their TV shows, but when you watch some truly amazing mediums do their thing, oh, it makes the ones that
amazing.
we see on TV, we're like, oh yeah, they're okay.
That's what we all aspire to be, a great medium.
Yeah, that's more important than the fame is being a good medium, because being a great medium transcends everything else. The money, the fame, it's not as important as actually delivering amazing messages for people who really want and need them most. And
So
that's the key.
really worked hard at our books to help you, so you can find yourself, you can find your gifts, and you can use them.
Absolutely. Well, that said, Susan, I think we're about done.
Thank you, guys.
Bless you, everybody. Love, light, and blessings again.
Bye.
Susan Grayson, Don Rumer-Rivera. Check out the book. And we will be following up this conversation with a number of shorts. So don't be surprised when they pop up on your screen.
Thank you.